She just wanted a cleaning job, but the millionaire recognized her, and everything changed. "Olivia, is that you?" The spray bottle slipped from her hands, crashing against the marble floor as cleaning solution spread across the pristine kitchen. Olivia Martinez froze, her yellow rubber gloves still dripping with sudsy water, staring at the man in the expensive suit who stood in the doorway like he'd seen a ghost. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wellington. I'll clean this up right away." Her voice came out smaller than she intended, professional and distant, but her heart hammered against her ribs. "No, don't." James stepped closer, his blue eyes searching her face with an intensity that made her want to run. "You pulled me out of that car 3 years ago. The accident on Highway 101. It was raining, and my Mercedes was on fire, and you... I think you have me confused with someone else." Olivia knelt quickly, grabbing paper towels to mop up the spilled cleaner. "I'm just here to clean your apartment." But James crouched down beside her, ignoring the expensive fabric of his pants touching the wet floor. "Your hair, the way you move. I've been looking for you for 3 years. I hired investigators, posted rewards." "Where did you go that night?" Olivia's hands shook as she wiped the marble. She could feel his stare, could smell his cologne mixed with the sharp scent of the cleaning solution. 3 years of carefully built walls threatened to crumble in an instant. "Please." The word came out as barely a whisper. "I need this job." The morning had started like any other. Olivia had kissed her mother goodbye at their small apartment in East San Jose, promising to pick up Maria's prescription on the way home. The rent was due in 3 days, and this Wellington job paid triple her usual rate. Her supervisor at Pristine Solutions had warned her that 3 cleaners had already quit this particular client, but Olivia couldn't afford to be picky. Standing outside the gleaming Wellington Tower, she'd felt the familiar ache of remembering when she used to enter buildings like this as a professional. 2 years ago, she'd been curator at the prestigious Meridian Gallery, organizing exhibitions that drew crowds from across the Bay Area. Now she carried a bucket and mop. The accident had changed everything, though she'd never told anyone the real reason she'd fled that night. "I know it was you," James said softly, still crouched beside her on the kitchen floor. "You saved my life." Olivia closed her eyes. She could still smell the gasoline, still hear the hiss of steam rising from the crumpled hood. She'd been driving home from her late shift at the diner she'd worked, before getting her papers sorted, when she'd seen the Mercedes spin out in the rain and slam into the concrete barrier. The driver had been unconscious, blood trickling from his forehead, and flames were already licking at the engine. She'd pulled him from the wreckage without thinking, dragging him to safety just before the car exploded. But when she'd heard sirens approaching, fear had overwhelmed her. Her temporary visa had expired months earlier. Getting involved with police, hospitals, insurance companies, it would have meant deportation, leaving her mother alone and sick. So she'd run. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, standing up and backing toward the kitchen island. "I'm here to clean, that's all." James rose too, his expression a mixture of frustration and something that looked almost like hurt. "I've spent 3 years wondering who you were, 3 years wanting to thank you. You disappeared like you were never there. Maybe I never was." Olivia turned away, focusing on the spotless countertops that didn't need cleaning. "Maybe you imagined it. Head injuries can cause false memories." "I didn't imagine this." James pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos until he found what he was looking for. The screen showed a grainy security camera image, a woman with long auburn hair pulling a man from a burning car. The image was blurry, taken from a distance but unmistakable. Olivia's breath caught. She'd never known there were cameras. "The traffic cam caught part of it," James said quietly. "This picture has been on my desk for 3 years. I've shown it to everyone. Private investigators, the police, news reporters. I offered a $50,000 reward for information leading to you." 50,000! The number hit her like a physical blow. That money could have paid for her mother's surgery, could have saved the gallery, could have changed everything. "You needed help," James continued. "That night you could have just called 911 and driven away. But you risked your own safety to pull me out." "Why?" Olivia gripped the edge of the counter. "Because 3 years ago she'd been undocumented and terrified. Because she'd known that one call to authorities could have destroyed everything she'd worked for. Because she'd learned that sometimes doing the right thing meant making the hardest choice. Anyone would have done the same thing," she said finally. "But you did it. You saved my life and I never got to say thank you." The weight of his gratitude felt heavier than his suspicion. Olivia had spent 3 years trying to forget that night, building a new life with proper documentation, steady work, and the quiet dignity of paying her own way. The last thing she needed was complications with a millionaire client who could destroy her carefully constructed world with a single phone call. "Thank you," she said, meeting his eyes for the first time. "Now you've said it. Can I please finish my work?" But James didn't move. He stood there studying her face like he was memorizing it, afraid she might disappear again. "What's your last name?" he asked. "Martinez. Olivia Martinez." He said it slowly, like he was testing how it sounded. "Will you have coffee with me?" "I'm working." "After work, then." "I don't think that's appropriate." "Because I'm your client?" "Because you're you and I'm me." Olivia picked up her cleaning supplies, desperate to put distance between them. "We live in different worlds, Mr. Wellington. What happened 3 years ago was just circumstance. Circumstance that saved my life. And now we're even." She headed toward the living room, hoping he wouldn't follow. "I need to finish cleaning before my next appointment." But as she dusted the expensive art that lined his walls, pieces she recognized from auction catalogs, paintings that had sold for more than most people made in a year, she could feel James watching her from the kitchen doorway. And despite her best efforts to forget, she could still remember the weight of his unconscious body as she dragged him to safety. Still remember the relief when he'd opened his eyes in the grass beside the highway and whispered, "Thank you." She'd been too afraid to stay and hear him say it then. Now, 3 years later, she wasn't sure she was brave enough to hear it now. "Your boss is acting weird," Sophia Chen announced, dropping a stack of contracts on James's desk with more force than necessary. "Weirder than usual, which is saying something." James looked up from his computer screen, where he'd been staring at the same quarterly report for the past hour, without reading a single word. "Good morning to you too, Sophia." "It's 2 in the afternoon." Sophia crossed her arms, studying him with the sharp attention that made her the best assistant in Silicon Valley. "You missed the board meeting, ignored 12 calls from investors, and according to building security, you've been watching the lobby cameras all morning. So either you're having a breakdown or something happened with the new cleaning lady. Her name is Olivia Martinez." "I know her name. I also know you've never learned a service worker's name in the 5 years I've worked for you. Yesterday you asked the barista about her art history degree. Last week you tipped the delivery guy $100 because he mentioned his kid needed school supplies." Sophia sat down across from his desk. "You're turning into a decent human being, and it's freaking me out." James leaned back in his chair. Sophia was one of the few people who could speak to him without filter, a privilege she'd earned through 4 years of managing his life with ruthless efficiency and unwavering loyalty. She'd grown up bouncing between foster homes, put herself through Stanford on scholarships, and had a talent for reading people that bordered on supernatural. "She's the one," he said simply. "The one what?" "The woman from the accident. The one who pulled me out of the car." Sophia's expression shifted from skeptical to surprised. "You're sure?" "Completely sure. Same hair, same way of moving, and when I said her name, she looked like she'd seen a ghost." James pulled up the traffic camera photo on his computer. "It's her, Sophia. After 3 years of searching, she just walked into my kitchen carrying a bottle of glass cleaner. And she denied it. Finished cleaning and left without saying another word." Sophia studied the photo, then looked at James. "Can you blame her? Some rich guy she's never met claims she saved his life 3 years ago? That probably sounds like the setup for a very uncomfortable situation. Or maybe she had reasons for disappearing that night that she's not ready to talk about. Such as..." James had spent the previous evening thinking about exactly that question. "I don't know, but I intend to find out." "By doing what?" "Having her investigated, offering her money, because I'm pretty sure both of those approaches will send her running for the hills." "By getting to know her." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "The cleaning lady. The woman who saved my life, who happens to be your cleaning lady, who happens to be brilliant." James turned his computer screen toward Sophia, showing a browser window full of search results. "I looked her up. Olivia Martinez was the assistant curator at Meridian Gallery until it closed 18 months ago. She organized 3 major exhibitions, wrote articles for Art in America, and had a master's degree from UC Berkeley. And now she's scrubbing your toilet. And now she's trying to survive like millions of other people who lost their jobs." James closed the laptop. "When I showed her my Rothko yesterday, she didn't just see an expensive painting. She talked about the layering technique, the way color creates emotional depth. She knows more about art than most of the collectors I know." Sophia was quiet for a moment, processing. You like her? I'm grateful to her. You like her? James didn't answer, but Sophia nodded, as if he'd confirmed her suspicion. Okay, she said, but you need to be careful. There's a power dynamic here that could get very messy very quickly. Rich boss, working class employee, mysterious past. It's like a bad romance novel waiting to happen. Before James could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Dinner tonight, 7 p.m. Your father wants to discuss the expansion project. Speaking of messy, Sophia said, reading over his shoulder. When was the last time your parents invited you to dinner without wanting something? Never. James deleted the message without responding. They're probably planning another setup with someone from their country club. The banker's daughter? Or the judge's niece? They've given up on subtlety. Sophia laughed. Your mother would have a heart attack if she knew you were interested in your cleaning lady. She's not my cleaning lady. She's... James trailed off, realizing he didn't know how to finish that sentence. She's what? She's someone I need to get to know. Meanwhile, across town, Olivia was having her own complicated conversation with her mother. You look tired, mija, Maria Martinez said from her spot on the living room couch, where she spent most of her days since the arthritis in her knees had worsened. How was the new job? Fine. Olivia set down grocery bags in their small kitchen, unpacking the medications she'd picked up from the pharmacy. The apartment is nice, very clean already. And the client? Olivia hesitated. How could she explain that her new client was a man whose life she'd saved 3 years ago? A man who'd been searching for her while she'd been trying to. Forget he existed. He's polite, she said finally. Maria studied her daughter's face with the intuition that came from 28 years of motherhood. But nothing, Mama. It's just work. Work that pays 3 times your usual rate. Work that I might not keep if I'm not careful. That evening, Olivia sat at their small kitchen table, reviewing job applications on her laptop. She'd sent out dozens of resumes for curator positions, gallery assistant roles, even museum gift shop jobs. The art world was small and competitive, and 18 months of cleaning houses had made her feel invisible in her own profession. Her phone rang, displaying a number she didn't recognize. Hello? Ms. Martinez, this is James Wellington. I hope you don't mind me calling. Olivia's grip tightened on the phone. How did you get this number? From your cleaning service. I wanted to apologize for yesterday. I made you uncomfortable, and that wasn't my intention. It's fine. It's not fine. You came to do a job and I ambushed you with personal questions. That was unfair. Olivia could hear the sincerity in his voice, and it made her chest tight. Thank you for apologizing. I have a proposition. Mr. Wellington. Not that kind of proposition, a professional one. There was a pause. I'm redecorating my living room, and I need someone with expertise in art selection and placement. I was hoping you might consult on the project. I'm a cleaning lady, not an interior designer. You're a trained curator with a master's degree in art history who's been forced to take cleaning jobs to pay the bills. The accuracy of his statement hit her like a physical blow. How do you... I looked you up. I know about Meridian Gallery, your exhibitions, your publications. I know you're overqualified for scrubbing floors, and I know you're probably doing it because you don't have other options right now. Olivia closed her eyes. What exactly are you offering? A consulting fee. $2,000 for a day of your time helping me choose and arrange artwork for my living space. Professional consultation. Nothing more. $2,000. More than she made in a month of cleaning jobs. Enough to cover her mother's medications for 3 months. Why? She asked. Because I have expensive art that I don't understand, and you have knowledge that I need. It's a fair trade. But Olivia heard something else in his voice, a loneliness that matched her own, a recognition that they were both trying to figure out how to move forward from that night 3 years ago. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I can ask. After she hung up, Olivia sat staring at her phone. She knew accepting James's offer would complicate everything, but she also knew that her mother needed those medications, and her pride couldn't pay the bills. Sometimes survival meant accepting help from the last person you expected to offer it. You want to do what? Sophia stared at James across his office desk, her expression somewhere between disbelief and concern. Help her get back into the art world. She's wasting her talent cleaning houses when she should be curating exhibitions. James pulled up Olivia's professional portfolio on his laptop. Look at these reviews from her shows at Meridian. The critics called her visionary and transformative. And you think throwing money at her problems is going to fix everything? I think offering her opportunities is better than watching her struggle. Sophia leaned back in her chair. James, listen to yourself. You've known this woman for exactly 3 days, and you're already planning to rescue her career. That's not gratitude. That's something else entirely. Before James could argue, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Olivia Martinez. I'll accept your consulting offer. When would you like to meet? She said yes, James said, showing Sophia the message. Of course she did. She needs the money. Sophia stood up, gathering her files. Just promise me you'll be careful. Good intentions can still cause a lot of damage. That afternoon, Olivia arrived at the Wellington penthouse carrying a leather portfolio she hadn't used in over a year. She'd spent the morning researching James's collection, preparing notes and suggestions with the same thoroughness she'd once brought to major exhibitions. Thank you for coming, James said, opening the door. He'd traded his usual business suit for jeans and a button-down shirt, looking more approachable, but somehow more dangerous to her peace of mind. Thank you for the opportunity. Olivia kept her voice professional as she followed him into the living room. I've reviewed the pieces you currently have displayed, and I have some thoughts about arrangement and lighting. For the next 2 hours, they worked together, moving paintings, adjusting spotlights, and discussing the emotional impact of color and composition. Olivia found herself relaxing despite her intentions, falling into the rhythm of work she genuinely loved. The Kandinsky should be the focal point, she explained, gesturing toward a vibrant abstract piece. But it's fighting with the Pollock for attention. If we move the Pollock to the east wall and adjust the lighting, both pieces can breathe. James watched her face as she spoke, noting the way her eyes lit up when she talked about art. You miss this. Miss what? This work. Being around art. Using your expertise. Olivia's smile faded. We should focus on your project. I have a proposal. Another one? I know people in the art world. Gallery owners, museum directors, collectors who are always looking for talented curators. I could make some calls, set up meetings. No. Olivia stepped back from the painting they'd been adjusting. Absolutely not. Why not? You're incredibly qualified and you deserve better than... Better than what? Honest work. Her voice rose, months of suppressed frustration finally breaking through. You think because I clean houses now, I need you to swoop in and save me? That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. Poor Olivia, fallen so far from grace. Let me use my connections to fix her sad little life. James ran a hand through his hair. I'm trying to help. I didn't ask for help. I asked for a consulting job, which I've done professionally and well. But apparently that's not enough for you. You're right, James said quietly. I'm sorry. I overstepped. But Olivia was already packing her portfolio. I should go. Please don't. Why? So you can offer to pay my rent next? Buy me a car? Set up a trust fund? She turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I know you mean well, but I can't be your charity case. You're not my charity case, you're the woman who saved my life, and I'm starting to think that was a mistake. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and final. James felt them like a physical blow, but before he could respond, Olivia was gone, leaving him alone with his perfectly arranged art and the echo of the door closing behind her. That evening, Sophia found James still sitting in his living room, staring at the Kandinsky that Olivia had positioned as the focal point. Rough day? She asked, settling into the chair across from him. I ruined everything. What happened? James recounted the afternoon's conversation, including Olivia's angry departure. Sophia listened without interruption, her expression growing more concerned with each detail. You offered to use your connections to get her jobs, she said when he finished. Yes, without asking if she wanted that kind of help. You thought wrong. Sophia's voice was gentler than usual. James, do you know what it's like to have people assume you can't succeed on your own? No. I do. Foster kid, scholarship student, Asian woman in tech. I've heard every variation of let me help you that exists. And most of the time, what people really mean is let me fix you because your struggles make me uncomfortable. James looked at her sharply. That's not what I meant. Maybe not, but that's probably what she heard. Sophia pulled out her phone. Besides, I did some research of my own today. Your cleaning lady has bigger problems than hurt pride. She showed him a news article from 6 months earlier. Meridian Gallery employees sue for unpaid wages. The article detailed how the gallery's closure had left several staff members without final paychecks, health insurance, or promised severance packages. Olivia Martinez was one of the plaintiffs, Sophia continued. The case is still pending, but in the meantime, she's responsible for her mother's medical bills, rent, and student loans from that master's degree you mentioned. How do you know about her mother? Because I'm very good at my job. Sophia pocketed her phone. The point is, she's not cleaning houses because she lacks ambition. She's cleaning houses because she needs to survive while fighting for money she's legally owed. James felt the weight of his mistake settling over him. I made her feel like I pitied her. Did you? No. I admired her. Her knowledge, her passion, the way she transformed my living room in 2 hours. He looked around the space, seeing it with new eyes. She made everything beautiful. Then you need to find a way to tell her that without making it sound like you're trying to buy her forgiveness. Before James could respond, his phone rang. His mother's name appeared on the screen. James, darling. Margaret Wellington's cultured voice filled the room through the speaker. I'm downstairs in the lobby. Buzz me up. Mother, this isn't a good time. Nonsense. I have news about the Harrisons' daughter. She's back from her year in Paris, and I thought... The line went dead as James hit the end call button, but it was too late. 3 minutes later, Margaret Wellington stepped off the elevator into her son's penthouse, impeccably dressed and carrying a bottle of champagne. Surprise, she announced, then stopped short at the sight of Sophia. Oh, I didn't realize you were working late. I was just leaving, Sophia said, gathering her things quickly. She shot James a look that clearly said good luck before heading for the elevator. Margaret surveyed the living room with a critical eye. You've rearranged things. It looks different. I had a consultant help with the placement. How lovely. Someone from the design firm? No. Someone with expertise in art curation. Margaret set down the champagne and removed her coat, settling into the chair Sophia had just vacated. Well, whoever it was did a nice job. Very artistic. She said the word like it was mildly distasteful. Now, about Caroline Harrison. Mother, I'm not interested in Caroline Harrison. You haven't even met her properly. I'm not interested in meeting her properly. Margaret's smile tightened. James, you're 32 years old. It's time you started thinking seriously about settling down with someone appropriate. Someone appropriate. Someone from a good family. Someone who understands our world. James thought about Olivia's hands as she'd adjusted the lighting on his paintings, the way she'd explained the emotional resonance of color placement, the pride in her voice when she'd talked about her exhibitions at Meridian Gallery. What if I told you I'd already met someone, he said. Margaret's eyes lit up. Really? Who? Do we know her family? Her name is Olivia Martinez. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Martinez. She's brilliant, talented, and the most genuine person I've ever met. What does she do? James hesitated, knowing his answer would detonate the fragile peace between them. She's between careers right now. Between careers. Margaret's voice carried the weight of generations of social conditioning. James, please tell me you're not talking about some unemployed girl who's caught your eye. I'm talking about a woman who saved my life. But Margaret was already shaking her head, her champagne forgotten. This is exactly what I was afraid of. You're too isolated, too vulnerable to the wrong kind of attention. These women can sense wealth from miles away. You don't know what you're talking about. I know more than you think. Margaret stood, smoothing her skirt with sharp, precise movements. Promise me you'll at least meet Caroline before you make any rash decisions. I'm not making any promises. James. Good night, Mother. After Margaret left, James stood alone in his transformed living room, understanding for the first time why Olivia had run from his offers of help. In his mother's reaction, he'd seen a preview of the world's judgment, the assumptions and prejudices that would follow them both if they dared to cross the invisible lines that separated their lives. But he'd also seen something else in his mother's eyes. Fear. Fear that her son might choose love over status, connection over convention. For the first time in years, James thought that might not be such a terrible thing. The hospital waiting room smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. Olivia sat in a plastic chair that had seen too many worried families, clutching a folder of insurance papers, and trying not to think about the conversation she'd had with Dr. Peterson 20 minutes earlier. Your mother's condition has worsened, he'd explained in the careful tone doctors used when delivering bad news. The arthritis has progressed to her spine, and there's significant inflammation around the nerve roots. Without surgery, she'll likely lose mobility in her legs within 6 months. And with surgery? Full recovery is possible, but the procedure isn't covered by her current insurance plan. The total cost would be around $60,000. $60,000. The number sat in Olivia's chest like a stone. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. "I owe you an apology. Can we talk?" She deleted the message without responding. The last thing she needed was more complications with the millionaire who seemed determined to rescue her, whether she wanted rescuing or not. "Olivia Martinez?" A woman's voice cut through her thoughts. Olivia looked up to see an elegantly dressed older woman approaching, her silver hair perfectly styled, and her expression carefully neutral. Even without an introduction, Olivia knew exactly who this was. "I'm Margaret Wellington," the woman said, settling into the chair beside her without invitation. "James's mother." Olivia's stomach dropped. "How did you find you? I have resources." Margaret's smile was sharp and cold. "I understand you've been working for my son. I clean his apartment, yes. And apparently you've developed ideas above your station." The words hit like a slap. Olivia straightened in her chair, meeting Margaret's gaze directly. "I'm sorry? My son seems to think you're someone special, someone worth his time and attention." Margaret glanced around the hospital waiting room, taking in the worn furniture and fluorescent lighting. "But I can see what you really are." "And what's that?" "Someone who sees an opportunity and plans to take advantage of it." Margaret opened her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. "This contains information about your immigration status 3 years ago, about your cousin Carmen, who was deported for domestic violence charges, about the lawsuit against your former employer that's been dragging through the courts." Olivia's blood turned to ice. "What do you want?" "I want you to disappear from my son's life, permanently." Margaret placed the envelope on the chair between them. "James is vulnerable right now. He's convinced himself that you're some kind of guardian angel, but we both know the truth. You saved him that night because you thought there might be something in it for you eventually. That's not true, isn't it? You could have called 911 and left. Instead, you pulled him out yourself, made sure he saw your face, then disappeared mysteriously. Very romantic, very memorable." Margaret's voice dripped with disdain. "And now, 3 years later, you just happen to show up as his cleaning lady. What are the odds? I didn't know it was him when I took the job. Please, don't insult my intelligence." Olivia's hands shook as she reached for the envelope. Inside were photocopies of legal documents, immigration papers, and what looked like surveillance photos of her apartment building. "Your citizenship application was approved 2 years ago," Margaret continued, "but applications can be reviewed, especially when new information comes to light about someone's past activities. Undocumented immigrants who flee accident scenes, for instance. I was scared. You were illegal." The word hung in the air like a weapon. Olivia had heard it countless times over the years, in news reports, political speeches, casual conversations where people talked about immigrants like they were things rather than human beings. But hearing it from Margaret Wellington, delivered with such casual cruelty, made her feel smaller than she had in years. "Your mother seems like a lovely woman," Margaret said, glancing toward the medical wing where Maria was waiting for test results. "It would be a shame if her immigration status came under scrutiny as well." "My mother is a legal resident." "Legal residents can still be deported if their family members are found to have committed fraud during the citizenship process." Olivia closed the envelope with trembling hands. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Stay away from James. Stop working for him. Stop taking his calls. Stop playing the mysterious woman who saved his life. If you care about your mother's health and your own future in this country, you'll disappear as completely as you did 3 years ago. And if I don't?" Margaret's smile was razor-sharp. "Then I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person James Wellington is dating. The undocumented immigrant who fled an accident scene, whose family has been involved with domestic violence cases, who's now trying to use a 3-year-old rescue to manipulate her way into a fortune. That's not what happened. It doesn't matter what actually happened. It matters what the story looks like in the newspapers." Margaret stood, smoothing her skirt with practiced precision. "I'm not a monster, Miss Martinez. I'm protecting my son from someone who will ultimately hurt him. You know as well as I do that this can never work between you. Better to end it now before anyone gets hurt." After Margaret left, Olivia sat alone in the waiting room, staring at the envelope in her hands. Everything inside was true. Her undocumented status 3 years ago, Carmen's deportation, the ongoing lawsuit. But Margaret had twisted the facts into something ugly and threatening, turning Olivia's survival into opportunism, her family's struggles into criminal behavior. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from James. "Please, I know I handled things badly, but I'd like to explain." This time, instead of deleting the message, Olivia typed back, "I can't see you anymore. Please don't contact me again." She hit send before she could change her mind, then turned off her phone and sat in the fluorescent-lit silence, wondering how saving someone's life had become the biggest mistake she'd ever made. 2 hours later, Dr. Peterson found her still sitting in the same chair. "Mrs. Martinez is stable," he reported. "We've scheduled the consultation with the orthopedic surgeon for next week. In the meantime, she'll need to stay off her feet as much as possible. About the surgery costs, we can discuss payment plans with the financial office. There are also some charitable programs that might help cover part of the expenses." Olivia nodded, though they both knew that charitable programs rarely covered $60,000 worth of surgery. She helped her mother into a wheelchair and pushed her toward the hospital exit, Margaret Wellington's threats echoing in her mind with every step. "You're quiet, Mija," Maria said as they waited for their rideshare. "Bad news from the doctor?" "Just tired, Mama. The surgery will happen. God provides." Olivia squeezed her mother's hand, wishing she had Maria's faith. God might provide, but Margaret Wellington had made it clear that some gifts came with prices too high to pay. That night, after helping her mother settle into bed, Olivia sat at their kitchen table and stared at her phone. James had sent 3 more messages, each one more concerned than the last. Finally, she turned the phone face down and opened her laptop. The screen showed her job search spreadsheet, dozens of applications, rejection letters, and a few promising leads that had ultimately gone nowhere. At the bottom of the list was a new entry she'd been avoiding: personal loan, fast cash solutions. The payday loan company's website promised quick approval and immediate funds. The interest rate was predatory, the terms designed to trap borrowers in cycles of debt, but it was the only option that didn't require perfect credit or collateral she didn't have. Olivia filled out the application with numb fingers, entering her income from cleaning jobs and her mother's medical expenses. The approval came back within minutes: $40,000 at 36% annual interest, payments of $800 per month for 7 years. She stared at the acceptance letter, calculating the math in her head. She'd end up paying nearly $70,000 for a $40,000 loan. It would consume most of her income for the next 7 years, leaving barely enough for rent and food, but it would save her mother's mobility, and it would keep Margaret Wellington's threats from becoming reality. Olivia closed the laptop without signing the loan agreement. She had 48 hours to decide. In the darkness of their small apartment, she could hear her mother's labored breathing from the next room, could feel the weight of Margaret's envelope on the kitchen counter, could imagine James, somewhere across the city, wondering why she'd suddenly cut off all contact. 3 years ago, she'd saved a stranger's life and thought that was the end of the story. Now she was learning that some rescues created debts that could never be fully repaid, and sometimes the person who needed saving most was the one who'd done the rescuing. Sophia Chen had been planning for 3 days, and when Sophia planned something, it happened with the precision of a military operation. She stood in the conference room of Wellington Tech, reviewing the presentation materials one final time. Art installation proposals covered the mahogany table, architectural drawings lined the walls, and a portfolio labeled Meridian Gallery Collection sat prominently at the head of the table. "The committee will be here in 10 minutes, she told James, who was pacing by the windows like a caged animal. "Are you ready?" "This is insane, Sophia." "She's not going to come." "She'll come. I made sure the request came through official channels from the City Arts Council. It's a legitimate consulting job worth $15,000. James stopped pacing. $15,000. For a month-long project evaluating art installations for the new tech corridor. Completely above board, no charity involved. Sophia straightened her blazer. "Though she doesn't know you're the primary investor in the project. She's going to be furious when she finds out. She's going to be grateful when she sees what we've really arranged." Sophia pulled out her phone, checking the time. "James, do you trust me?" "With my life." "Then stop pacing and let me handle this." 20 minutes later, Olivia Martinez walked into the Wellington Tech conference room carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the same professional demeanor she'd once brought to gallery openings. She'd spent the previous night researching the Arts Corridor project, preparing notes and recommendations with desperate thoroughness. The consulting fee would cover 2 months of her mother's medication and buy her time to find other solutions. She couldn't afford to turn it down, even if it meant working in the same building where James Wellington conducted his business. "Ms. Martinez," Sophia stood to greet her. Thank you for coming. I'm Sophia Chen, Project Coordinator. Thank you for considering me for the consultation. Your qualifications are exactly what we need. Sophia gestured toward the presentation materials. As you can see, this is a significant undertaking. Olivia surveyed the room, noting the quality of the architectural plans and the scope of the project. This is much larger than I expected. The city is committed to making this corridor a showcase for local and international artists. We need someone with curatorial experience to help select pieces that will resonate with both the tech community and the general public. For the next hour, Sophia walked Olivia through the project details, discussing placement strategies, artist selection criteria, and community engagement goals. Olivia found herself getting excited despite her reservations, seeing possibilities for exhibitions that could bring art to people who might never visit traditional galleries. The timeline is ambitious, Olivia said, reviewing the project schedule. You're looking at 6 major installations across 4 buildings, plus the outdoor sculpture garden, which is why we need the best curator we can find. Sophia pulled out the Meridian Gallery portfolio. We were particularly impressed by your work with emerging artists and community outreach programs. Olivia opened the portfolio and froze. Inside were photographs and reviews from her exhibitions at Meridian Gallery, but also something else. Purchase receipts showing that someone had been systematically buying pieces from her shows over the past 2 years. I don't understand, she said slowly. Those pieces were acquired by private collectors who wanted to preserve your curatorial legacy, Sophia explained. They're now available for loan to the Arts Corridor project. Olivia flipped through the documentation, recognizing painting after painting from her most successful exhibitions. Someone had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars buying art, specifically because she had curated it. Who were these collectors? Before Sophia could answer, the conference room door opened, and James Wellington walked in. I'm sorry I'm late, he said, his eyes meeting Olivia's across the room. I hope I haven't missed the presentation. Olivia stood up so fast her chair rolled backward. What is this? This is James Wellington, Sophia said calmly, the primary investor in the Arts Corridor project. You planned this. Olivia's voice was barely controlled. Both of you. We planned an opportunity, James said. A real job, with real responsibilities and real compensation. Nothing you haven't earned. Using art that you bought from my exhibitions. Using art that investors bought because they recognized your talent for finding and showcasing extraordinary work. Sophia pulled out another folder. The Arts Corridor project is legitimate, Olivia. The city approved it, the funding is real, and we genuinely need someone with your expertise. Olivia sank back into her chair, overwhelmed. Why? James moved closer, his expression serious. Because 3 days ago, I offered to help you and made you feel like I pitied you. But I don't pity you, Olivia, I admire you. Your knowledge, your passion, the way you can look at a painting and see not just what it is, but what it could mean to someone experiencing it for the first time. This is too much. This is what you deserve. What you've always deserved. He gestured toward the art documentation. Those collectors didn't buy these pieces as investments. They bought them because you showed them how art could change the way they see the world. Sophia cleared her throat. There's something else you should know. The medical fund. What medical fund? The one that's been covering your mother's hospital bills for the past week. Sophia pulled out another set of documents. It's a community assistance program for immigrants' families dealing with medical emergencies. The funding comes from several anonymous donors. Olivia stared at the paperwork, seeing her mother's name and treatment details. You paid for my mother's surgery. We established a fund that your mother qualified for, Sophia corrected. She applied through the proper channels, met all the criteria and was approved for assistance. The fact that James contributed to the fund doesn't make it charity, it makes it community support. Which is what communities do, James added. They help each other. Olivia felt tears threatening, but she blinked them back. Your mother came to see me at the hospital. James's expression darkened. What did she say? That I should stay away from you. That she had information about my immigration status that could hurt me and my family. She had no right. She was protecting you from someone she sees as a threat to your reputation and your future. James sat down across from her, his voice gentle but firm. The only threat to my future is losing you again. James, I know this is complicated. I know there are obstacles and people who will judge us for being from different worlds. But I also know that 3 years ago, You risked your safety to save my life, and ever since then, I've been trying to figure out how to live in a way that honors that sacrifice." Olivia looked around the conference room, at the art documentation and project plans, at Sophia's encouraging smile, and James's earnest expression. She thought about her mother's medical bills, about Margaret Wellington's threats, about the payday loan application still sitting on her kitchen counter. "This job," she said slowly, "it's real. Completely real," Sophia confirmed. $15,000 for the initial consultation, with additional compensation for ongoing curatorial work. The City Arts Council has already approved your appointment. And the medical fund will continue to assist your mother and other families who need help, regardless of what happens between you and James personally, Sophia said. It's been established as a permanent program. Olivia closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the past week settling over her. Margaret Wellington's threats, her mother's surgery, the impossible choice between pride and survival, all of it suddenly seemed manageable. "I have conditions," she said. "Name them," James replied immediately. "This stays professional during business hours. The Arts Corridor project gets my complete focus and expertise, but I won't be treated as your girlfriend in training." "Agreed." "I want to expand the community outreach component, art education programs, workshops for local schools, opportunities for emerging artists to show their work." "That's exactly what we were hoping for." "And I want to meet with your mother." James looked surprised. "Olivia, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do, if we're going to do this, any of this. She needs to understand who I really am. Not the version she's created in her head, but the actual person." Sophia grinned. "I like her, James." "So do I," he said, his eyes never leaving Olivia's face. "More than I should, considering she still thinks I'm an arrogant rich guy with a savior complex." "You are an arrogant rich guy with a savior complex," Olivia said, but she was almost smiling. "You're also someone who spent 2 years buying art, just because I curated it." 3 years, James corrected. "I've been buying pieces from your exhibitions for 3 years. Since the accident? Since I realized that the woman who saved my life had created something beautiful in the world, and I wanted to make sure that beauty didn't disappear." Olivia felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the fear and pride that had kept her walls so carefully constructed. "That's either the most romantic thing I've ever heard, or the most manipulative." "Can it be both?" Sophia asked. "Definitely both," Olivia agreed, "but mostly romantic." James reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "So you'll take the job?" "I'll take the job." She turned her hand over, palm up, letting their fingers intertwine. "And maybe, when the workday is over, we can figure out what comes next." "I'd like that," James said. "Good," Sophia announced, gathering her files. "Because your mother is arriving for dinner in 2 hours, and you're both going to need time to prepare for that conversation." Olivia's eyes widened. "Tonight?" "No time like the present," Sophia said cheerfully. "Besides, she's expecting to meet Caroline Harrison, the banker's daughter. This should be much more interesting." As Sophia left the conference room, Olivia and James sat alone with their joined hands, and the weight of everything that had brought them to this moment. "Are you ready for this?" James asked. "Probably not," Olivia admitted. "But I saved your life once. I figure I can handle your mother." "My mother is significantly more dangerous than a burning car." "Then it's a good thing I'm not planning to run away this time." The community center buzzed with opening night energy. Olivia stood near the entrance of the Martinez Community Arts Gallery, watching as families, artists, and neighbors filtered through the space she'd spent 6 months transforming from an empty warehouse into something magical. Local teenagers admired photography exhibits documenting their own neighborhoods, while elderly residents shared stories about the historical pieces that chronicled the area's immigration history. Children pressed their faces against glass cases containing interactive art installations, and parents discovered paintings by artists whose names they'd never heard, but whose experiences reflected their own. "You did it," James said, appearing beside her with 2 cups of champagne. "You actually did it. Actually—" Olivia accepted the glass, her eyes scanning the crowd. "We did it, all of us." The gallery bore little resemblance to the sterile perfection of her old world. Instead of white walls and hushed reverence, the space pulsed with color and conversation. Local artists displayed work alongside established pieces from James's collection, creating conversations between different perspectives and experiences. In the corner, Maria Martinez held court from her wheelchair, surrounded by visitors who wanted to hear about the traditional crafts exhibit she'd helped organize. Her surgery had been successful, and while she still used the wheelchair for longer outings, her pain had diminished significantly. "Mija," Maria called, waving Olivia over. "Mrs. Chen wants to know about the weaving demonstration next week." Sophia approached, carrying a clipboard and wearing the satisfied expression of someone whose plan had exceeded all expectations. "The attendance numbers are incredible. We've had over 300 people through here in the first 2 hours." "And the media response?" Olivia asked. 3 local news stations, 2 newspapers, and someone from the Chronicle wants to do a feature story." Sophia grinned. "You're about to become the art world's favorite success story." Olivia shook her head. "This isn't about me. It's about proving that art belongs to everyone, not just people who can afford gallery openings in Nob Hill. Which is exactly why it's such a great story." A familiar voice made Olivia turn. Margaret Wellington approached, elegantly dressed but looking genuinely impressed by the gallery's atmosphere. She'd maintained her distance during the planning months, but James had insisted on inviting her to the opening. "Mrs. Wellington," Olivia said carefully, "thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me." Margaret's smile was warmer than Olivia had ever seen it. "I owe you an apology. Several apologies, actually. You were protecting your son. I was protecting my own prejudices." Margaret gestured toward the crowded gallery. "This is extraordinary, Olivia. You've created something I didn't think was possible." "What's that?" "A space that brings people together instead of keeping them apart." Margaret's voice carried a note of wonder. "I've attended charity galas and museum fundraisers for 30 years, and I've never seen anything like this." Before Olivia could respond, a commotion near the main exhibit drew their attention. James stood in front of a large display case, microphone in hand, trying to quiet the crowd. "If I could have everyone's attention," he said, his voice carrying across the gallery. "I have something important to say." The conversations gradually died down as people gathered around. Olivia moved closer, curious about what James had planned. "6 months ago," James began, "I hired Olivia Martinez to curate art for a corporate project. I thought I was offering her a job, but it turned out she was offering me something much more valuable, a new way of seeing the world." Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Olivia felt her cheeks warm as all eyes turned toward her. This gallery exists because Olivia believed that art shouldn't be locked away in private collections or exclusive institutions. She believed it should live in communities, where it can inspire and connect people across all the boundaries that usually divide us. James paused, reaching into his jacket pocket. "But tonight isn't just about celebrating this gallery. It's about celebrating the woman who made it possible." Olivia's heart began to race as James pulled out a small velvet box. 3 years ago, Olivia Martinez saved my life by pulling me from a burning car. Tonight I want to ask her to save it again by agreeing to build something beautiful with me." The crowd fell silent as James opened the box, revealing a ring that caught the gallery's warm lighting. But this wasn't an ostentatious diamond designed to impress. Instead, it was a delicate band incorporating a small piece of metal and glass, materials that Olivia recognized immediately. "Is that," she whispered, "a piece of your first art installation from the Meridian Gallery show 3 years ago," James confirmed. "The one called Phoenix Rising. First, I had it incorporated into the ring because you taught me that the most beautiful things often emerge from destruction." Tears blurred Olivia's vision as she looked at the ring, remembering the mixed media piece she'd created during her darkest period after losing her job. She'd used scrap metal and broken glass to create something that spoke to resilience and transformation. "Olivia Martinez," James said, his voice steady despite the hundreds of people watching, "will you marry me?" The gallery was completely silent. Olivia could hear her mother's soft crying, could see Sophia's encouraging nod, could feel the weight of everyone's attention. But mostly, she could see James. Not the millionaire who tried to rescue her, not the privileged man who lived in a different world, but the person who'd spent months learning to see art through her eyes, who'd supported her vision even when it challenged everything he thought he knew about success. "Yes," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Yes, I'll marry you." The gallery erupted in cheers and applause as James slipped the ring onto her finger. The metal and glass caught the light, transforming what had once been broken into something whole and beautiful. As they kissed, surrounded by the community they'd built together, Olivia thought about the journey that had brought them here. 3 years ago, She'd pulled a stranger from a burning car and then disappeared into the night, terrified of the consequences. Tonight, she was standing in a gallery filled with art and laughter and love, surrounded by people who'd become family. "I love you," James whispered against her ear as the crowd continued celebrating around them. "I love you too," she whispered back, "but I'm still not cleaning your apartment anymore." He laughed, spinning her around as their community celebrated with them. "I wouldn't dream of asking." Later, as the evening wound down and the last visitors filtered out, Olivia and James stood alone in the gallery they'd created together. The walls were covered with art that told stories of struggle and triumph, of communities that had survived by supporting each other, of beauty that emerged from the most unexpected places. "So what happens now?" Olivia asked, leaning against James's shoulder. "Now we plan a wedding, run a gallery, and figure out how to change the art world one community at a time." "Sounds like a lot of work." "The best kind of work," James agreed. "The kind that matters." Through the gallery windows they could see the lights of the city stretching out before them, a landscape of possibility and challenge, of different worlds that could be bridged by understanding and shared purpose. 3 years ago, Olivia had saved James's life in a moment of instinctive compassion. Tonight, they'd discovered that the real rescue had been learning to save each other, not from external dangers, but from the isolation and fear that kept them from building something beautiful together. As they locked up the gallery and walked into their shared future, Olivia realized that some stories didn't end with rescue. The best ones began there, with two people choosing to create something larger than themselves, something that would outlast them both. The Martinez Community Arts Gallery would continue to grow, bringing art and opportunity to neighborhoods that had been overlooked by the traditional art world, and, at its heart, would always be the truth that had brought them together. Sometimes, the person who needs saving most is the one doing the rescuing, and sometimes the most profound. Connections emerge from the simplest acts of human kindness. 3 years after the gallery opening, the morning sun streamed through the windows of the Martinez Community Arts Gallery as Olivia unlocked the front doors, her movements practiced and purposeful, despite the gentle weight of her 7-month pregnancy. The gallery had evolved significantly since its opening night. What had started as a single warehouse space now occupied 3 connected buildings, housing permanent collections, rotating exhibitions, artist studios, and educational programs that served over 2,000 community members each month. "Early as always," Sophia said, appearing in the doorway with a steaming cup of herbal tea. As the gallery's executive director, she'd traded her corporate blazers for comfortable cardigans and paint-stained jeans, though her organizational skills remained as sharp as ever. "The documentary crew arrives in an hour," Olivia replied, accepting the tea gratefully. "I want to make sure everything's ready." The PBS team was filming a feature about community-driven cultural institutions, using their gallery as a model for how art could transform neighborhoods. It was the kind of recognition Olivia had once dreamed of in her Meridian Gallery days, but now it felt less like personal validation and more like a platform to share their community's story. "James is setting up the main exhibition space," Sophia continued, "though he keeps muttering about how you shouldn't be lifting anything heavier than a paintbrush." Olivia laughed. "He's been impossible since the doctor mentioned I should take it easy. Yesterday he tried to carry my purse because he thought it looked too heavy. Protective husband syndrome. It's very sweet if slightly annoying." They walked through the gallery's main hall, past walls lined with work from local artists who'd grown from tentative beginners to confident professionals through the gallery's mentorship programs. The space buzzed with quiet morning activity, teenagers from the after-school program setting up for their photography workshop, elderly community, members arranging flowers for the weekly art therapy sessions, and volunteers preparing materials for the children's creative writing class. In the corner, Maria Martinez supervised a group of women working on a collaborative textile installation. Her health had stabilized remarkably since the surgery, and she'd become one of the gallery's most beloved volunteers, teaching traditional crafts while learning digital art techniques from teenagers young enough to be her grandchildren. "Mia!" Maria called as Olivia approached. "The camera people will want to film the weaving demonstration, yes?" "If you're comfortable with it, Mama." "Comfortable? I'm excited. Mrs. Chen from the Senior Center wants to be on television too." Maria's eyes sparkled with mischief. "She's been practicing her English all week." James emerged from the exhibition space, carrying a ladder despite Sophia's pointed look. His business attire had given way to jeans and work shirts, though he still moved with the confident efficiency that had made him successful in tech. Leaving Wellington Tech had been easier than anyone expected. The company practically ran itself, and his investments continued to fund their community programs while giving him the freedom to focus on work that felt meaningful. "The lighting in the main hall is perfect," he reported, kissing Olivia's cheek. "Though I still think you should sit down for the interview. I'm pregnant, not fragile. You're carrying my child and running 3 art programs simultaneously. There's a difference." Before Olivia could argue, the front doors opened to admit the documentary crew, along with a familiar figure that made her heart skip. "Carmen!" Olivia hurried toward her cousin, who'd arrived from Los Angeles for the filming. Carmen Ruiz embraced her carefully, mindful of the pregnancy. She'd returned to the United States 2 years earlier through the Immigration Assistance Program that James and Olivia had established, and had since completed nursing school with help from the Foundation's education grants. "I wouldn't miss this," Carmen said. "My cousin, the famous art curator, getting her own documentary. It's not about me, it's about the community." "Which is exactly why it matters," Carmen replied. "You remember what you told me when I was afraid to come back? That sometimes you have to risk everything to build something worth having." The filming took most of the day, with the crew capturing everything from Maria's weaving demonstration to James explaining the gallery's funding model to teenagers, showcasing their latest digital art projects. But the moment that would become the documentary's centerpiece came when they filmed Olivia in front of the memorial wall they'd established 3 years earlier. "This wall honors people who've lost their lives helping others," she explained to the camera, her hand resting gently on her belly. "But it's also about recognizing that rescue isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as teaching a child to paint, or helping an elderly person share their story, or creating a space where people who've never met can discover what they have in common." The interviewer, a thoughtful woman named Dr. Patricia Valdez, nodded. "Your gallery has become a model for community engagement in the arts. What advice would you give to other communities wanting to create similar programs?" Olivia considered the question, looking around at the space that had become so much more than she'd originally envisioned. "Start where you are with what you have. We began with a group of people who believed that art could bring communities together. Everything else, the funding, the space, the programs, grew from that shared belief. And your husband's resources didn't hurt," Dr. Valdez added with a smile. "Resources help," Olivia agreed, "but they're not what makes programs succeed. What makes them succeed is when people see themselves reflected in the work, when they feel ownership of the space, when they realize that their stories and experiences matter." After the crew finished filming, the gallery's extended family gathered for dinner in the community kitchen they'd added the previous year. Margaret Wellington sat between Maria Martinez and Sophia, discussing plans for the senior artist's upcoming exhibition. She'd become one of the gallery's most effective fundraisers, using her social connections to bring resources and attention to community art programs throughout the Bay Area. "I have an announcement," Margaret said, tapping her wine glass with a fork. "The Wellington Foundation has approved funding for 5 new community galleries based on this model, 1 in Oakland, 1 in Fresno, 1 in Sacramento, and 2 in Los Angeles." The room erupted in cheers and applause. James reached for Olivia's hand, squeezing it gently. "There's more," Margaret continued. "Each gallery will be paired with an existing community organization, and the Martinez Community Arts Gallery will provide training and support for their development." "That's incredible," Sophia said. "We'll need to expand our training programs." "Which brings me to my second announcement." Margaret smiled at her son and daughter-in-law. "I'd like to establish a fellowship program for emerging community arts organizers, full funding for training, materials, and first-year operational costs." "In whose name?" Olivia asked. "The Maria Martinez Fellowship for Community Arts Leadership," Margaret replied, raising her glass toward Olivia's mother. "Because sometimes the best way to honor someone is to help others follow their example." Maria wiped tears from her eyes as the room toasted her contribution to the gallery's success. Later, as the evening wound down and people began heading home, Olivia and James walked through the quiet gallery one final time, checking locks and turning off lights. 5 new galleries, Olivia mused, running her hand along a display case containing children's artwork. "Can you believe it?" "I can believe it because I've watched you build this place from nothing but vision and determination." They paused in front of the memorial wall, where fresh flowers had been placed beneath the plaque about rescue and community. Olivia thought about all the ways they'd learned to save each other over the past 3 years. Not just the dramatic moment that had brought them together, but the daily choices to support each other's dreams, to challenge each other's assumptions, to build something larger than their individual ambitions. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. "The accident?" "Every day," James replied, "but not the way I used to." "What do you mean?" "I used to think about it as the night you saved my life. Now, I think about it as the night we both started learning how to live." Their baby kicked gently, as if agreeing with the sentiment. They'd decided not to learn the gender, preferring to be surprised, but they'd already chosen names that honored both their backgrounds: Eleanor Carmen for a girl, after James's Irish grandmother and Olivia's cousin, or Diego James for a boy, combining their family traditions. "This little one is going to grow up in a very different world than either of us did," Olivia said. "A better world, I hope. Definitely a more colorful one." As they prepared to leave, Olivia caught sight of their reflection in the gallery's front windows. Two people who'd found each other across seemingly impossible divides, now preparing to raise a child who would grow up believing that art belonged to everyone, that communities could be built on shared creativity, and that the most meaningful success came from lifting others up. 3 years after that opening night, when James had proposed in front of their entire community, the Martinez Community Arts Gallery had become more than either of them had imagined. It was a place where teenagers discovered their artistic voices, where elderly immigrants shared cultural traditions with neighbors, where families found programs they could afford, and where anyone could walk in off the street and find something beautiful waiting for them. The documentary would air 6 months later, bringing national attention to their model and inspiring similar programs across the country. But standing in their gallery on that quiet evening, surrounded by the evidence of their community's creativity and resilience, Olivia and James understood that the real success wasn't in the recognition or the expansion. It was in the daily miracle of people choosing to create beauty together, in the teenagers who now saw themselves as artists, in the elderly volunteers who'd found new purpose, in the families who'd discovered that art could be a bridge across any divide. And sometimes, late at night when the gallery was quiet and the city lights filtered through the windows, they could still feel the presence of that younger version of themselves, the undocumented woman who'd risked everything to save a stranger, and the isolated man who'd spent 3 years searching for someone to thank. Those people had been necessary to bring them to this moment, but they were also gone, transformed by the community they'd built and the love they'd discovered. The woman who'd pulled James from that burning car 3 years earlier had been running towards safety. The woman who now carried his child and ran a thriving community arts center was running towards something entirely different, toward the endless possibility of what people could build together when they chose connection over fear, creativity over convention, and love over the barriers that the world insisted were insurmountable. As they drove home through the city they'd learned to see with new eyes, Olivia placed her hand on her belly and thought about the story she would someday tell their child about the night everything changed. It wouldn't be a fairy tale about a prince rescuing a princess, or even about a woman saving a man's life. It would be the true story of how two people learned that the most profound rescue was helping each other become who they were meant to be, and how the most lasting art was the community they created together. One relationship, one program, one act of generosity at a time.